Hi, and welcome to the Virtual Coach Advantage podcast from Springboard Future. I'm Emma Calvert, co founder and coach at Springboard Future, and your podcast host. And joining me today is Neela Betteridge, our master coach and co founder. Our podcast today has got a really intriguing title of Facing the Black Swan. And we've recorded this at the start of March 2021, when we feel like we perhaps have been in this Black Swan event for a while. It's such a big topic that we're going to split it into two parts. So, part one, today we're going to talk about what it means for you as an individual and what some of the tools and techniques you, as a leader and a manager, can use to help you continue to face into the Black Swan event that we live in. Neela, let's get started. It's a really intriguing title, but what do we actually mean?
Hi, everyone. Yes, a really intriguing title, Emma. So essentially, the Black Swan represents a really unpredictable event. So COVID is a Black Swan event, for instance, and it can have potentially severe consequences. And we only have to look at the budget yesterday and what we're going to be paying back for decades to actually see what the consequences of this 1 year Black Swan has been just on our country. It's very rare, hopefully, and it has impacts. And of course, in the context of what we're talking about, it has enormous impact on leaders and organizations.
I've seen loads of people debate online whether COVID is a Black Swan event or not, so it's whether you could predict it or not. And we're not here to get into that. But I really want to pick up on this theme of the Black Swan because it can be both in our personal lives and in our organisations, can't it, Neela?
Yes, it can. It definitely can. So anything that is unexpected and shocking that changes the course of your life or a country's life is a Black Swan event.
What we want to talk about, I guess, is about how we can be equipped to cope and find our way through it successfully. And so, thinking about that, Neela, what I'd like to do is to take the individual first, because as the leaders, as the manager, as individuals, it's a really high intense crisis environment that we need to look at ourselves so we can be the best leaders and help others.
Absolutely, Emma. And I think it's really important that managers and leaders look after themselves in these sort of periods, that they draw on the tools and actually their support network, most importantly, in a time of change or crisis. But also, this is where self aware leaders do much better as well, because actually, this is all about having the staying power, the energy in order to keep performing. And interestingly enough, I was talking to a leader yesterday who has really taken this mantra to heart because he's had one of the most challenging years he's ever had. And what's enabled him to do this is really taking care of himself and using everything that he's learnt to do that.
Even pre-COVID, well-being was a really hot topic. But it is about that, isn't it, Neela? The first thing is about your well-being in a time of crisis. So what are some of the stuff that we should be thinking about?
Well, isn't it interesting? We kind of brush well-being under the carpet when times are good and we go, oh, well, we'll be all right. We just have another holiday or have a weekend off, etc. But when you're in a Black Swan event, it actually becomes critical. And yet that is when you are totally triggered and want to go from 1 to 100 and do everything and have an endless list and endless meetings and etc. But actually what you should be doing is every day having time for reflection, time out. And it sounds a bit woolly, but honestly, it is one of the best ways of being able to resource yourselves in a Black Swan event. And I've just read this incredible book called In Praise of Walking, and that's one of the strategies that you could use. But it's about the immense benefits of being able to still keep going when all around you is changing, which is what a Black Swan does. These practices, this well-being is actually now critical in order to actually navigate well.
I love that phrase, Neela, resource yourself. Because often we don't think about well-being as a tool, particularly leaders. And I really love that, you're talking about as a leader, take time to reflect, resource yourself. For me, that's including some basic things like how much sleep are you getting? So obviously in a time of crisis, you're working longer, you're working later, but you need to resource yourself with sleep, with nutrition. You've mentioned walking there, with exercise. And I know you're a big fan, aren't you, Neela? Tony Schwartz from the Energy Project. You just want to tell us a little bit more about energy, because I think that's really important for leaders to dig into.
Yes, I love Tony Schwartz's work, and I would encourage anybody to have a look on YouTube. He's did a talk for the Cambridge Union on this, and he looks at the 4 areas that he believes is really important, and he starts with the body. And that's about physical energy. And you will notice from the other podcasts, I talk about this a lot, how you actually make sure you've got the right nutrition, you're sleeping properly, you're exercising and not over exercising, because actually that can have the negative effect. And this is the foundation, if you like, of leaders being able to deal with black swan events. And then once the body is okay, then you can actually also look at practices around how you manage the emotional space, But if your body's not right, you're not going to be able to manage the emotional space. And this is all underpinned by purpose, of course. Purpose is like a map. And what you're talking about with a black swan is that you're in a hurricane. And while your boat will not navigate very well, at least you know the direction that you're supposed to be going. You might be blown off course, but you can keep trugging on. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, I just want to kind of come back to the kind of Tony Schwartz, body element first, because I sort of mentioned it as well about, needing to look after how much you sleep, your nutrition, that sort of stuff. But it's actually my experience when I worked, in leadership roles in corporates, is sometimes the reality of that is quite hard. So you don't go out for that run or a walk because you're just working all the time. You grab food on the go, takeaways. I know my go-to is using wine as a way to unwind. And then that makes you go to bed later. It contributes to a poor night's sleep. So, Neela, great tips to look after your body and do all of this. But how do we make it a reality?
Yes, it's like anything that's good for us. We often resist it very heavily, and that's the human experience. But I think one of the ways to do it is not make it impossible. That's the first thing. So there's no point I'm going to go for a 2-hour walk every day, because you're obviously not going to do that. But I would be saying to you, what is really manageable and pragmatic? So if it's 20 minutes at 7 o'clock before you've got to get the kids off to school, or something that you do at lunchtime, make it timely, make it manageable, and write it down. I often put it on my fridge. And what I always encourage leaders I work with to do is to not try and do everything. So to say, week 1, I'll do this. Week 2, I will do that. Week 3, I will do that. So it doesn't become something else on their action list, which actually can become a source of pressure. So I think this is a really important thing. Think about what it is that you really are going to do. Write it down and hold your feet to the fire on it.
Yeah, it's a great hack, that, Neela. And I know it works really well. And if anybody else is really interested in understanding habits a bit more, there's a great book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. So that can help you with exactly the type of stuff that Neela's talking about. But essentially what you're talking about is boundary setting, isn't it, Neela, as well? It's making sure that we've got some boundaries that are going to help us have the energy and the balance that we need.
That's right. And actually, just to say a little bit more about boundaries, it is very difficult in this virtual world when people are constantly putting meetings in your diaries to hold boundaries. And this requires leaders to be able to have quite direct conversations with people to manage those boundaries. Because if we're saying that actually it is really important in terms of boundaries and habits to have a 20-minute walk because it gives you space and calm and dopamine and all these great things, and somebody keeps putting a meeting in your diary at 7 o'clock in the morning, that's where you really need to get very firm about the boundary. And explain to whoever it is that's doing it that this is absolutely critical to your resilience in these unprecedented times. It's not a nice to have, it's an absolutely critical to have. And it should be considered as important as a meeting with a CEO.
Yeah, and then there's something else here, and you reminded me of something that I did back, it must have been in lockdown too, actually, in November time. I sort of got to the middle of the week and I felt like I was in a real funk, really down and really like, oh, when is this going to end? And actually, I had a bit of a coaching the coach moment, and it was about personal responsibility, because I wasn't setting the boundaries, or I was setting them but letting them creep. And I wasn't going out for the walk that you're talking about, Neela, the 20-minute walk. And I came to that realization that actually no one else could do it but me. And that was about personal responsibility.
I love this whole thing around personal responsibility because it links with Tony Schwartz's work, but it also links with the drama triangle. When we are right up against it in terms of this sort of change, a black swan change, my strong sense about this is that we have to move out of victim or persecutor or rescuer into what I call the player. And that player is somebody who is responsible, voicing, and accountable. And therefore they have boundaries. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Emma, and that's what you did. And that recognition that we can't ask somebody to do it for us. We can't blame people. We've got to take responsibility. I think that's what Black Swan events make us do. You have to step into the space.
Yeah, and I think it's also important for leaders, not just for themselves to step in that space, but also as role models to be showing that, to show the people that they're leading that it's okay that you don't have a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's okay that you take a break and go for that walk. Neela, can I just bring you back into Tony's model? Because you mentioned earlier on about emotions, and I think that is really critical in a Black Swan event. Can you tell us a little bit more about the emotions?
Yeah, well, emotions, as we all know, go up and down. And the more severe a Black Swan event is, the more up and down we will tend to be. But the foundation of emotions is keeping the body well. And that's why I'm always going on about actually the body practices that need to be in place in order that the emotional space can kind of catch up, because it's like a shock to the system. But there is another piece around this, and I am an enormous fan of mindfulness. And I don't mean necessarily mindfulness sitting in a darkened room for an hour, but I walk and I do mindfulness. It's about getting really present in what it is that's happening. And what we tend to do as human beings is we move away from the pain. We move away from whatever it is that's causing us discomfort. I'm a strong believer that if we move into it and sit with it, rather than move away, we are much more likely to be able to turn the dial down on the emotion. It's counterintuitive, but I'd encourage our listeners, if you are facing something very difficult or you feel rotten about something, don't move away from it, sit in it, because it helps you with what Tony's talking about in the emotional space.
Yeah, and the rest, because you are talking about mindset there as well, Neela, and the other parts of Tony's model are intrinsically linked to mindset, aren't they?
They are. They're very much so. And so, the purpose bit of Tony's model is really about mindset again, having your navigation system. And just remind me, Emma, what's the third part of his model?
It's the mind. So it's,
Yes.
he talks a lot about how distractions can be costly, which, I mean, gosh, I'm distracted all of the time at the moment. It's concentration, it's getting your mind focused and having the energy to focus your mind.
Yes, and when we're stressed, of course, we don't focus. We're all over the place, which is why I think these practices all work together, actually. It's not just one. It's difficult. I think mindset is a culmination of all those other things. And although Tony doesn't talk about this in terms of mindset, I strongly believe that actually the Stoic way of looking at life, and I encourage people to look at the Stoic writings, they're very, very interesting about actually not becoming a victim, but the acceptance. And that's not the same as not doing anything, but it's about when things happen to you, to not fall into the victim mode. It is what it is, and why not you? I always think that's an interesting frame, actually, to consider things. And the other thing which I think is very important in this is a growth mindset. So, yeah, that wasn't great. I've lost something, but actually, what can I learn from it? What's the next stage? Where can I apply this? That's the way we need to be thinking. But I don't think if your emotional space, your purpose and your body is not right, it's very difficult to get into the right mindset.
Thanks, Neela. This has been a really fascinating conversation, and there's lots that I'm taking away from this. The growth mindset you've just talked about now, I think, is so important. Knowing and seeing what we can learn from these times of adversity is really important to us. I'm going to come back to it again because I really loved it. That resource yourself, just how important it is to make sure that you're managing your energy and your emotions and your body. So really important, as is that time for reflection. So fascinating conversation, and we really hope that this has given our listeners some practical tips, as well as being interesting to listen to. So today we really focused on you as an individual when you're a leader and you're a manager, and what you need to do to look after yourself to be at your best as that leader and that manager in those black swan moments. But in part 2 of this podcast, what we're going to talk about is how the organisation faces black swan events and how you can help the organisation move through them. Well, thanks for listening today. We really hope that you've enjoyed listening to our podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback, any comments or requests for topics that you'd like us to talk about. You could get in touch with us via our website, springboardfuture.com, or find us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Don't forget to join us for our next podcast. Thanks for joining the Virtual Coach Advantage podcast. We hope to coach you again soon.